Hey y'all! So we're going to be beginning chapter 14 in the book. Of course it's upside down. Women Who Run with the Wolves. And like I've mentioned before, this chapter is pretty long actually. It's very rich. And I say they're all rich. I know I do, but I really feel like they are. But this one's actually especially long. So I wanted to actually show you. It's roughly this much of the book, you can see. So it's there's a lot to it, and so we're going to take our time, and today we're going to be discussing the introduction to the main story. There's a story in this chapter, like a folk tale, right, like all the others, and this story is really incredible. It's one that will stick with you. I know it will. It's a story about reclaiming what is ours, reclaiming our authority over our own life after going through manipulative circumstances or relationships where we were manipulated to surrender that, right? So it's about reclamation. It's a beautiful story of reclamation. It's a story of endurance through the worst kinds of things you can imagine in life. And then also wandering off where we never belonged. And so it's circling back to where we should be in life. And so, yes, because I know that, you know, at some point, if you're just trying to do good and live truthfully, and you're an honest person in this old world, you know, there's going to come a point, if you haven't already been through it. I mean, I feel like all of us are going to come face to face with manipulative people and just bad circumstances and bad experiences, and we're going to be fooled into investing in the wrong things and the wrong people. And so it's this story of reclamation, this story of endurance is going to resonate with all of us, I feel like, you know, and especially those of us who have been through narcissistic psychological abuse. So I highly recommend that if you are interested in journaling, if that's part of your practice that you do, I would recommend just jotting some notes throughout the story. And then what I'm going to do after I read the introduction, I'm going to go ahead today and I'm going to read the story to you. And then it's kind of a long story, but I feel like it's important. And then after the story, I'm going to read the headlines to the sections following the story that the author has split up her thoughts and her explanation and her teachable areas through the story. She split them up into different sections the way she has through all the chapters. So I'm going to, after the story today, I'm going to go ahead and give you those headlines so that you can jot those down in your journal, and then you may want to go ahead before the next video comes out, because it'll be a couple of days before I can put another video out. Should be Friday. And so that'll give you an opportunity to go ahead and put your thoughts down with these headlines as prompts before hearing what the author has to say, and then you can just add to it, you know. Once you hear whatever she's got to say, it may expand your own thoughts as well. You may agree with her, you may disagree with her, but at least it'll get the wheels turning, right? Which is always my goal. So I hope you're excited about this. Stories, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, she opens this section talking about stories, and it's something that I've mentioned before, how we can relate so closely to the characters in a story. And remember that you can view these stories kind of like two different ways at once. The characters in the story can be relatable to you as parts and pieces of your own psyche, as well as playing out in the real world, the characters, like one being you and another being, a narcissist in your life, or a mentor in your life, or a partner, or whatever it is. So you can relate to these stories on multiple levels. And she's going to explain how they help us to learn the things we've gone through, how we can identify with the story in a special way. We're going to be talking about that, which is pretty cool. And all of this is meant to help us put the puzzle pieces together, because we've already lived through and had to figure things out most of the time on our own without having this kind of information. A lot of times it's only after we have left a bad situation and we've faced those hard truths, on our own, and now we're out of it, and we've processed the best we can, but this just helps us to take it a step further. You see what I'm saying? For further comprehension and motivation, and for building that beautiful future that awaits us. So let's dive in. Okay, so chapter 14 is called La Selva Subterránea, Initiation in the Underground Forest. And the first section is called The Handless Maiden. It says, if a story is seed, then we are its soil. Just hearing the story allows us to experience as though we ourselves were the heroine, I found out how to say it, who either falters or wins out in the end. If we hear a story about a wolf, then afterward we rev about and know like a wolf for a time. If we hear a story about a dove finding her young at last, then for a time after something moves behind our own feathered breasts. If it be a story of wresting the sacred pearl from beneath the claw of the ninth dragon, we feel exhausted afterward and satisfied. In a very real way, we are imprinted with knowing just by listening to the tale. Yeah, among Jungians, this is called participation mystique, a term borrowed from anthropologist Levi Bruhl, and it is used to mean a relationship wherein a person cannot distinguish themselves as separate from the object or thing they behold. Among Freudians, it is called projective identification. Among storytellers, it is called sympathetic magic, meaning the ability of the mind to step away from its ego for a time and merge with another reality, experiencing and learning ideas there. It can learn in no other form of consciousness and bringing these back to consensual reality. The Handless Maiden is a remarkable story, one in which we find the toes of the old night religions peeking out from under the layers of the tale. The story is formed in such a way that listeners participate in the heroine's test of endurance, for the tale has such amplitude that it takes long to tell it and even longer to absorb. Customarily, I teach this tale over 7 nights' time, and sometimes, depending on the listeners, over 7 weeks, and sometimes 7 months' time, spending 1 night, week, or month for each labor in the story, and there is reason for this. The story pulls us into a world that lies far below the roots of trees. From that perspective, we see that the Handless Maiden offers material for a woman's entire life process. It deals with most of the key journeys of a woman's psyche. Unlike other tales we have looked at in this work that speak to a specific task or a specific learning taking place over a few days or weeks' time, the Handless Maiden covers a many years-long journey, the journey of a woman's entire lifetime. So this story is something special, and a good rhythm for assimilating it is to read it and sit with your muse, turning it part by part over a generous period of time. The Handless Maiden is about women's initiation into the underground forest through the rite of endurance. The word endurance sounds as though it means to continue without cessation, and while this is an occasional part of the tasks underlying the tale, the word endurance also means to harden, to make sturdy, to make robust, to strengthen, and this is the principal thrust of the tale and the generative feature of a woman's long psychic life. We don't just go on to go on. Endurance means we are making something. I thought that was beautiful, because it's kind of like when she says we're making something, it's like once we can embrace this life, death, life cycle, which I feel like this is related to that, right? Making something, then we're going to have even more motivation to continue, even more fuel for enduring, through the hard times. So it says the teaching of endurance occurs all throughout nature. The pads of wolf pups' paws are soft as clay when the pups are born. It is only the ranging, the roaming, the treks on which their parents take them that toughen them up. Then they can climb and bound over sharp gravel. And so she's talking about how the wolves toughen up their young, and that's really beautiful. And so, and obviously she relates that to us, right? So she says, in mythos, the teaching of endurance is one of the rites of the great wild mother, the wild woman archetype. It is her timeless ritual to make her offspring strong. It is she who toughens us, makes us potent and enduring, which reminds me of, out of all the things that we, if you practice prayer, out of all the things that we can pray for, this reminds me of praying for strength, So she says, this is where learning takes place, and these attributes are acquired in La Selva Subterranea, the underground forest, the underworld of female knowing. Again, it all goes back to that intuition, that intuitive nature within us. It is a wild world that lives under this one. While there, we are infused with instinctive language and knowledge. Yes, it's like our own language, right? It's when you're there. From that vantage point, we understand what cannot be so easily understood from the point of view of the topside world. The maiden in this tale masters several descents. As she completes one round of descent and transformation, she plunges into yet another. These alchemical rounds are complete, each with a loss, sacrifice, coming of light, following one upon the other. The king and the king's mother each have a round themselves. All this descending and loss and finding and strengthening portrays women's lifelong initiation into the renewal of the wild. So it's a renewal. Yes. She says, she goes into all the different versions of the story, like all of these folk tales, they are a little bit different depending on the area that it originates from, but it's always the same message and very similar attributes as well, depending on where you find the tale. And she says her Aunt Magdalena had a sly storytelling habit. I thought this was cool. She caught her listeners off guard by beginning a fairy tale with, "This happened 10 years ago," and then proceed to tell a tale from the medieval era, complete with knights, moats, and all. Or she'd say, "Once upon a time, just last week," and then she'd tell a tale about a time before humans wore clothing. So here is the story, The Handless Maiden. Once upon a time, a few days ago, the man down the road still owned a large stone that ground the villagers' grain to flour. The miller had fallen on hard times and had nothing left but the great rough millstone in a shed and the large flowering apple tree behind it. One day, as he carried his silver-lipped axe into the forest to cut dead wood, a strange old man stepped from behind a tree. "There's no need for you to torture yourself by cleaving wood," wielded the old man. "I shall dress you in riches, if you will, but give me what stands behind your mill." "What is there behind my mill but the flowering apple tree?" thought the miller, and agreed to the old man's bargain. "In 3 years' time, I'll come take what is mine," chortled the stranger, and he limped away, disappearing between the staves of the trees. The miller met his wife on the path. She had run from their house, apron flying and hair askew. "Husband, husband, at the stroke of the hour into our house came a finer clock upon the wall. Our rustic chairs were replaced by those hung in velvet, and the paltry cupboard abounds now with game. Our trunks and boxes are overflowing. Pray tell, how has this happened?" And even at that moment, golden rings appeared on her fingers, and her hair was drawn up with a golden circlet. "Ah," said the miller, looking in awe as his own doublet turned to satin. Before his eyes, wooden shoes with the heels worn to nothing, so he walked tilted backward. They too turned into fine shoes. "Well, it's from a stranger," he gasped. I came upon an odd man in a dark frock coat in the forest, and he promised great wealth if I gave him what is behind our mill. Surely, wife, we can plant another apple tree." "Oh, my husband," wailed the woman, and she looked as though she had been struck dead. "The man in the black coat was the devil, and what stands behind the mill is the tree. Yes, but our daughter also is there sweeping the yard with a willow broom." So, yes, this man volunteered his daughter as a trade with the devil. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So, made a bargain. It says, "And so the parents stumbled home, weeping tears on all their finery. Their daughter stayed without husband for 3 years and had a temperament like the first sweet apples of spring. The day the devil came to fetch her, she bathed and put on a white gown and stood in a circle of chalk she had drawn around herself. When the devil reached out to grab her, an unseen force threw him across the yard. The devil screamed, 'She must not bathe anymore, else I cannot come near her.' The parents were terrified, and so some weeks went by, and she did not bathe until her hair was matted, her fingernails like black crescents, her skin gray, her clothes darkened and stiff with dirt. And then, with a maiden every day, more resembling a beast, the devil came again. But the girl wept, and her tears ran through her palms and down her arms, and now her hands and arms were pure white and clean. The devil was enraged. 'Chop off her hands, otherwise I cannot come near her.' The father was horrified. 'You want me to sever the hands of my own child?' The devil bellowed. 'Everything here will die, including you, your wife, and all the fields for as far as you can see.' The father was so frightened he obeyed, and begging his daughter's forgiveness, he began to sharpen his silver-lipped axe. The daughter submitted, saying, 'I am your child, do what you must.'" Look at how fearless this girl is, right? Most of us would be mortified. So, and this he did, and in the end, no one could say who cried out the louder, the daughter or the father. Thus ended the girl's life as she had known it. When the devil came again, the girl had cried so much the stumps that were left of her lambs were clean again, and the devil was again thrown across the yard when he attempted to seize her, cursing in words that set small fires in the forest. He disappeared forever, for he had lost all claim to her. The father had aged 100 years, and his wife also. Like true people of the forest, they continued as best they could. The old father offered to keep his daughter in a castle in great beauty and riches for life, but the daughter said she felt it more fitting she become a beggar girl and depend on the goodness of others for sustenance. And so she had her arms bound in clean gauze, and at daybreak she walked away from her life as she had known it. She walked and walked. High noon caused her sweat to streak the dirt on her face. The wind disheveled her hair until it was like a stork's nest of twigs, all tangled this way and that. In the midst of the night she came to a royal orchard where the moon had put a gleam on the fruit that hung from the trees. She could not enter because the orchard was surrounded by a moat. She fell to her knees, for she was starved. A ghostly spirit in white appeared and shut the sluice gate, so the moat was emptied. The maiden walked among the pear trees, and somehow she knew that each perfect pear had been counted and numbered, and that they were guarded as well. Nevertheless, a bough bent itself low so she could reach it, its branch creaking. She put her lips to the golden skin of a pear and ate while standing there in the moonlight, her arms bound in gauze, her hair afright, appearing like a mud woman, the handless maiden. The gardener saw it all, but recognized the magic of the spirit who guarded the maiden and did not interfere. After the girl was finished eating the single pear, she withdrew across the moat and slept in the shelter of the wood. The next morning the king came to count his pears. He found one missing, and looking high and looking low, he could not find the vanished fruit. When asked, the gardener explained, "Last night 2 spirits drained the moat, entered the garden at high noon, and one without hands ate the pear that offered itself to her. The king said he would keep watch that night. At dark, he came with his gardener and his magician, who knew how to speak with spirits. The three sat beneath a tree and watched. At midnight, the maiden came floating through the forest, her clothes dirty rags, her hair awry, her face streaked, her arms without hands, and the spirit in white beside her. They entered the orchard the same way as before. Again, a tree gracefully bent itself to her reach, and she supped on the pear at its bow's end. Bow, I'll have to look into that. The magician came close, but not too close, to them and asked, "Are you of this world or not of this world?" And the girl answered, "I was once of the world, and yet I am not of this world." The king questioned the magician, "Is she human or spirit?" The magician answered that she was both. The king's heart leapt, and he rushed to her and cried, "I shall not forsake you. From this day forward I shall care for you." At his castle he had made for her a pair of silver hands, which were fastened to her arms, and so it was that the king married the handless maiden. In time, the king had to wage war in a far-off kingdom, and he asked his mother to care for his young queen, for he loved her with all his heart. "If she gives birth to a child, send me a message right away." The young queen gave birth to a happy babe, and the king's mother sent a messenger to the king telling him the good news. But on the way, the messenger tired, and coming to a river, felt sleepier and sleepier, and finally fell entirely asleep by the river's edge. The devil came from behind a tree and switched the message to say the queen had given birth to a child that was half dog. The king was horrified at the message, yet sent back a message saying to love the queen and care for her in this terrible time. The lad who ran with the message again came to the river, and feeling heavy as though he had eaten a feast, soon fell asleep by the side of the water. Whereupon the devil again stepped out and changed the message to kill the queen and her child. The old mother was shaken by this request, and sent a messenger to confirm. Back and forth the messengers ran, each one falling asleep at the river, and the devil changing messages that became increasingly terrible, the last being, "Keep the tongue and eyes of the queen to prove she has been killed." The old mother could not stand to kill the sweet young queen. Instead, she sacrificed a doe, took its tongue and eyes, and hid them away. Then she helped the young queen bind her infant to her breast, and veiling her, said she must flee for her life. The women wept and kissed each other goodbye. The young queen wandered till she came to the largest, wildest forest she had ever seen. She picked her way over and through and around, trying to find a path. Near dark, the same spirit in white as before appeared, and guided her to a poor inn run by kindly woods people. Another maiden in a white gown took the queen inside and knew her by name. The child was laid down. "How do you know I'm a queen?" asked the maiden. "We who are of the forest follow these matters, my queen. Rest now." So the queen stayed 7 years at the inn, and was happy with her child and her life. Her hands gradually grew back, first as little baby hands, pink as pearl, and then as little girl hands, and finally as woman's hands. During this time, the king returned from the war, and his old mother wept to him, "Why would you have me kill 2 innocents?" and displayed to him the eyes and the tongue. Hearing the terrible story, the king staggered and wept inconsolably. His mother saw his grief, and told him these were the eyes and tongue of a doe, and that she had sent the queen and her child off into the forest. The king vowed to go without eating or drinking, and to travel as far as the sky is blue in order to find them. He searched for 7 years. His hands became black, his beard moldy brown like moss, his eyes red-rimmed and parched. During this time he neither ate nor drank, but a force greater than he helped him live. At last he came to the inn kept by the woods people. The woman in white bade him enter, and he lay down so tired. The woman placed a veil over his face, and he slept. As he breathed the breath of deepest sleep, the veil billowed and gradually slipped from his face. He awakened to find a lovely woman and a beautiful child gazing down at him. "I am your wife, and this is your child." The king was willing to believe, but saw the maiden had hands. "Through my travails and yet my good care, my hands have grown back," said the maiden, and the woman in white brought the silver hands from a trunk where they had been treasured. The king rose and embraced his queen and his child, and there was great joy in the forest that day. All the spirits and the dwellers of the inn had a fine repast. Afterward, the king and the queen and baby returned to the old mother, held a second wedding, and had many more children, all of whom told this story to 100 others, who told this story to 100 others, just as you are one of the 100 others I'm telling it to. So that's the story of the Handless Maiden. Yes, I hope that you'll continue to join me. Breaking the story down is going to be just incredible. I'm really excited to do it. And just remember, I don't read ahead beyond right before I present a video for you all, because I kind of want to be on the same page with you. And so I love learning with you. It's exciting, it's fun, and I encourage you to read ahead, obviously, if you have the book and want to do that. But you know, I just feel like these kind of stories and breaking them down, taking the time to think on them and to allow ahas to surface within our mind is so valuable. You know, it's this learning process is incredible, because especially when you have come away from a toxic relationship, a toxic environment where you have unknowingly surrendered a part of yourself, you know what I mean? Just like in the story here, right? It's about reclamation. It's about realizing you are the author, you are the narrator of your own life, and it's just taking those reins back again. And so if you would like, I would encourage you to grab a pen and paper, and I'm going to go ahead and share with you the titles of the sections that are coming next, so that you can use them as prompts to start thinking about the story, and maybe just jotting down what comes up for you just based on these prompts. And then when we come back together, we're going to go through her thoughts, the author's breakdown of each section, and you can add to that. So all right, just a little homework for you if you want. So the first section is called the first stage, the bargain without knowing. And then we have the second stage, the dismemberment. As you can see, there's a lot of pages to each one. The third stage, the wandering. The fourth stage, finding love in the underworld. So rich. The fifth stage, the harrowing of the soul. The sixth stage, the realm of the wild woman. And the seventh stage, the wild bride and bridegroom. I believe that's it. Yeah. So I hope that you have been inspired. I hope that this has given you a lot to think about. I hope this has already helped to move those puzzle pieces a little bit closer together. And I just hope that you have enjoyed as much as I have sharing this with you. So thank you again. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you again very soon.